What if I told you that your desperate need for others is the very thing keeping you weak? Pay close attention, because what you're about to learn will dismantle everything society taught you about connection, belonging, and human nature itself. There's a moment, a fracture point in every person's life where they realize they've been begging for scraps from a world that respects only those who need nothing. And in that moment, the average person does what they've been conditioned to do. They cling harder. They justify their dependence. They call it loyalty, love, community. But to those who understand power, it's the moment they recognize you as prey. Let me be brutally clear. Every connection you've formed, every relationship you've nurtured, every network you think protects you, it's all built on a foundation of need. And need is weakness weaponized. When you need someone's approval, they own your actions. When you need someone's presence, they control your peace. When you need someone's validation, they dictate your worth. You are not free. You are a hostage negotiating with your own chains, calling it friendship. This is the uncomfortable truth that philosophers throughout history understood but rarely spoke aloud. The self-sufficient man is feared, envied, and ultimately untouchable. He doesn't participate in the social games that keep most people enslaved. He doesn't trade pieces of his soul for the comfort of belonging. He stands alone not because he was rejected, but because he chose the kingdom within over the circus outside. And that choice, that singular decision to become ruthlessly self-sufficient, changes everything. You want to know why some people move through the world with an aura that seems almost supernatural? It's not charisma, it's not confidence. It's the silent declaration that they would rather walk alone forever than compromise their internal sovereignty for a moment of external comfort. And the world senses this. People feel it without understanding it. They see someone who doesn't need them, and it creates a gravitational pull far more powerful than any neediness ever could. But let's destroy the fantasy first, because you need to understand what you're truly choosing. Self-sufficiency is not a personality trait. It's not something you're born with. It's a deliberate, calculated destruction of every social conditioning that made you believe you couldn't survive alone. It's the systematic elimination of every emotional dependency you've built as a safety net. And it's brutal, because when you start this journey, you will lose people. Not because you're cruel, but because your transformation will reflect their cowardice back at them. They will call you cold. They will say you've changed. They will accuse you of thinking you're better than everyone else. And they'll be right. Not because you're superior as a human being, but because you chose a path they're too terrified to walk. The first step toward ruthless self-sufficiency is recognizing the invisible contracts you've been signing your entire life. Every time you modify your behavior to avoid conflict, that's a contract. Every time you silence your truth to keep the peace, that's a contract. Every time you extend energy to people who wouldn't cross the street to help you, that's a contract. And these contracts have been bleeding you dry, one small compromise at a time. You've been negotiating away your power in exchange for the illusion of connection. The person you see in the mirror is not who you truly are. It's a composite of everyone else's expectations, fears, and judgments projected onto you. And until you burn that false self to ash, you will never know what true freedom feels like. This is where most people stop. They recognize their dependency, they feel the weight of their social chains, and they make a decision. I'll change, but slowly. I'll set boundaries, but gentle ones. I'll take my power back, but without upsetting anyone. And that's where they fail, because you cannot negotiate with your own imprisonment. You cannot politely ask for your sovereignty back. Self-sufficiency is not a gradual adjustment. It's a violent rupture from everything that made you comfortable. It's the willingness to sit in the most uncomfortable silence you've ever experienced and let every person who took advantage of your availability feel the weight of your absence. Let me give you a framework, a blueprint that the truly self-sufficient follow, whether they articulate it or not. First, audit your relationships with cold precision, not with emotion, not with nostalgia, not with the memory of who people used to be or who you hope they'll become. Look at what they are right now, in this moment. Ask yourself these questions without mercy. Does this person add tangible value to my life, or do I keep them around out of obligation? Would I invest time in this relationship if I met this person today, or am I honoring a contract signed by a weaker version of myself? Does this person respect my boundaries, or do they constantly test them because they sense I won't enforce consequences? And here's the most important one. If I disappeared tomorrow, would this person's concern be about me or about what they lost access to? These questions are not cynical, they're surgical. Because ruthless self-sufficiency requires you to see people for what they functionally are in your life, not what you emotionally wish they were. And when you start applying this framework, something terrifying and liberating happens simultaneously. You realize that most of your social circle is dead weight. Most of your relationships are transactional, but only one side is paying. Most of the people you call friends would watch you drown if saving you required them to get uncomfortable. This realization doesn't make you bitter. It makes you focused. It removes the fog of social obligation and shows you exactly where your energy has been leaking. Now comes the execution phase, and this is where your resolve will be tested. You must become comfortable with the one thing modern society has trained you to fear more than death itself: being alone. Not lonely, alone. Loneliness is the painful feeling that you're separated from connection. Aloneness is the powerful recognition that you are complete without it. The person who masters aloneness becomes dangerous because they cannot be leveraged. Think about it. Every manipulation tactic relies on exploiting someone's need. Guilt works on people who need approval. Fear of abandonment works on people who need companionship. Social pressure works on people who need belonging. But when you genuinely don't need any of that, when you've built an internal world so rich and fulfilling that external validation becomes irrelevant, you become immune to the tools that control everyone else. This is what the philosophers meant when they talked about the sovereign individual, not someone who rules others, but someone who has absolute dominion over their own mind, emotions, and reactions. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote extensively about power dynamics, but the deepest lesson in his work is this: the prince, who needs nothing from his subjects, rules with unshakable authority. The moment he needs their love, their approval, their validation, he becomes weak. He makes decisions based on maintaining favor rather than strategic necessity. And that's when he loses everything. The same principle applies to your life. The moment you need something from someone, they have power over you. The moment you can walk away without a second thought, you reclaim that power. But let's go deeper, because self-sufficiency isn't just about cutting people off. That's the easy part. Any coward can isolate themselves and call it strength. True self-sufficiency is about building something so complete within yourself that you choose connections from a place of abundance, not desperation. It's about becoming so internally resourced that when you do engage with others, you're offering value, not extracting it. This is the difference between the hermit and the sovereign. The hermit runs from the world because it hurts him. The sovereign walks through the world untouched because he has built an inner fortress that cannot be breached. So how do you build this fortress? Through competence, discipline, and the systematic elimination of dependencies. Let's start with competence. Most people are dependent on others because they lack fundamental skills. They need someone to fix their car, handle their finances, manage their emotions, make their decisions, validate their choices. Every gap in your competence is a door through which dependency enters your life. The self-sufficient individual closes these doors methodically. Learn to cook, not just to survive, but to master nutrition for peak performance. Learn basic repairs, basic finances, basic legal knowledge. Not because you'll never hire experts, but because you'll never be helpless without them. Competence is the antidote to dependency. Every skill you master is a chain you break. Then there's discipline, and this is where most people's self-sufficiency fantasy dies. Because discipline is not motivation. Discipline is doing what needs to be done, regardless of how you feel, who's watching, or what you'll receive in return. It's waking up at the same time every day and executing your routine, even when every fiber of your being wants to stay in bed. It's maintaining your standards when no one is around to acknowledge them. It's keeping your word to yourself, even when breaking it would be easier and no one would know. This is the crucible where self-sufficiency is forged. Most people can't be self-sufficient because they can't be self-disciplined. They need external accountability because their internal accountability is non-existent. They need someone to watch them work out, someone to check their progress, someone to praise their efforts, because without that external validation, they collapse. If this describes you, you are not ready for self-sufficiency. You are still a child cosplaying as an adult. The systematic elimination of dependencies is perhaps the most painful part of this process. Take an honest inventory of everything you depend on for your sense of stability, identity, or peace. Is it your relationship status, your social media metrics, your job title, your physical appearance, the approval of a specific person, the membership in a particular group? Each of these is a vulnerability. Each is a lever someone can pull to destabilize you. The truly self-sufficient individual identifies these dependencies and systematically destroys them, not by abandoning what's valuable, but by removing the emotional power these things have over his internal state. You can be in a relationship without depending on it for your identity. You can have a job without it defining your worth. You can engage in social media without needing the validation it provides. But this requires you to build an internal source of stability so powerful that external circumstances become weather, not earthquakes. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the accusation that self-sufficiency is selfish, that it's antisocial, that it goes against human nature. This is what weak people say to keep you weak. They weaponize your compassion, your desire to be good, your fear of being perceived as cold or arrogant. They tell you that needing nothing from others makes you less human. But here's the truth they don't want you to understand. The most generous, impactful, and genuinely valuable people are those who need nothing. Think about it. When you help someone because you need to feel good about yourself, that's not generosity, that's a transaction. When you maintain a relationship because you fear loneliness, that's not connection, that's hostage negotiation. When you give to others because you want something in return, even if it's just acknowledgement, that's not virtue, that's commerce. True generosity only exists from a place of overflow, and you can only overflow when you are complete within yourself. The self-sufficient individual is not a hermit or a sociopath. He is someone who has done the internal work to become whole. And from that wholeness, he chooses how, when, and with whom he engages. He doesn't need friends, but he may choose to have them. He doesn't need a partner, but he may choose to build with someone who matches his level. He doesn't need recognition, but he may accept it when it's offered genuinely. The difference is in the energy. Need is desperate, clutching, anxious. Choice is calm, deliberate, powerful. People feel this difference even when they can't articulate it. They sense when you need them, and it repels them on a subconscious level. They also sense when you don't need them but choose them anyway, and it creates a completely different dynamic, one of respect, fascination, even reverence. There's a particular kind of freedom that comes with ruthless self-sufficiency, and once you experience it, you can never go back. It's the freedom of walking away from anything that no longer serves you without guilt, without explanation, without looking back. It's the freedom of knowing that if every person in your life disappeared tomorrow, you would grieve what was real, but you would not collapse. It's the freedom of entering every interaction as a complete person, offering value rather than seeking it, present by choice rather than necessity. This freedom is what people sense in those rare individuals who seem to operate by different rules. They're not trying to impress anyone. They're not performing for approval. They're simply existing in their power, and that existence is magnetic precisely because it asks nothing of you. But let me warn you about what happens when you achieve this state. You will become a mirror. Your self-sufficiency will reflect other people's dependencies back at them, and they will hate you for it. Your ability to walk away will make them confront their inability to do the same. Your lack of need will highlight their desperation, and instead of being inspired to change, most will attack you. They'll call you arrogant, detached, unfeeling. They'll say you think you're better than everyone else. They'll create narratives about you being lonely, broken, or running from something. Let them. Their judgment is not your burden to carry. It's their confession that they lack the courage to do what you've done. There is a particular archetype throughout history that embodies ruthless self-sufficiency, and you see echoes of it in every culture. The wandering monk who owns nothing but possesses everything. The stoic philosopher who watches Rome burn with equanimity. The samurai who serves with loyalty but whose identity is not tied to his lord. The entrepreneur who builds empires but could walk away tomorrow without regret. What unites all of these figures is a common core. They built their kingdom internally first. Everything external was a choice, not a necessity. Every relationship was entered into from abundance, not scarcity. Every achievement was a reflection of internal standards, not external validation. This is what ruthless self-sufficiency looks like in its highest form. Not isolation, but sovereignty. Not coldness, but clarity. Not superiority, but self-mastery. So how do you begin this transformation today, right now? Start with radical honesty. Look at your life and identify every place where you're compromising yourself for others. Every conversation where you don't say what you really think. Every commitment you honor out of guilt rather than genuine desire. Every relationship you maintain because you fear the discomfort of ending it. Write them down, all of them. Then, one by one, start addressing them. This doesn't mean you burn every bridge tomorrow. It means you start enforcing boundaries, speaking your truth, and withdrawing energy from what doesn't serve you. Watch what happens. Some people will adjust. They'll realize you're no longer available for manipulation, and they'll decide whether the relationship is worth maintaining on terms of mutual respect. Most won't. They'll escalate, test your resolve, try to guilt you back into compliance. And when you don't budge, they'll leave or fade away. Let them. Each person who leaves creates space for the only relationship that truly matters, the one with yourself. Simultaneously, start building competence in areas where you're currently dependent. Pick one skill per month and develop it to functional proficiency. It doesn't matter what it is. Cooking, coding, fitness, finance, negotiation, public speaking, whatever fills a gap in your self-sufficiency. The goal is not to become an expert in everything. It's to reach a level of capability where you know. Longer feel helpless without external help. This gradual accumulation of competence has a psychological effect that's difficult to overstate. Each new skill is evidence that you can figure things out, that you can adapt, that you can survive and thrive regardless of external circumstances. This evidence builds a deep, unshakable confidence that is completely different from the fragile ego-based confidence most people operate from. Develop a daily practice of aloneness. Not isolation, aloneness. Spend time each day completely alone with your thoughts. No phone, no music, no distractions, just you and the raw experience of being yourself. In the beginning, this will be excruciating. Your mind will race. You'll feel anxious, bored, uncomfortable. You'll reach for your phone 100 times, resist, sit with the discomfort. What you're doing is confronting every fear, insecurity, and unresolved issue you've been numbing with constant stimulation and social engagement. This is the price of self-sufficiency. You have to be willing to face yourself completely, without filters, without distractions, without the comforting presence of others. And on the other side of this confrontation is something priceless: self-knowledge. You cannot be self-sufficient if you don't know yourself, and you cannot know yourself if you're constantly drowning in external noise. As you progress on this path, you'll notice changes that others will comment on before you fully recognize them yourself. You'll stop over-explaining your decisions. You'll become comfortable with being misunderstood. You'll lose the compulsion to defend yourself against accusations because you'll recognize that other people's opinions are their reality, not yours. You'll find yourself naturally pulling away from draining relationships without drama or announcement. You'll simply become unavailable, and your silence will say everything that needs to be said. Your time will become more valuable to you, and you'll guard it fiercely. Invitations that you would have accepted out of obligation will be declined without guilt. Requests for your energy that don't align with your priorities will be met with a polite but firm no. And something strange will happen. People will start respecting you more, not because you've become cruel, but because you've become clear. There's a specific moment in the journey towards self-sufficiency that serves as a test, and not everyone passes it. It's the moment when someone you genuinely cared about, perhaps even loved, reveals that your new boundaries make them uncomfortable and they choose to leave. This is the moment where you discover whether you've truly internalized self-sufficiency or whether you were just performing it. If you chase, you fail. If you compromise your boundaries to keep them, you fail. If you feel that without them you're somehow less, you fail. But if you can let them go, genuinely wish them well, and continue on your path without looking back, you pass. You've demonstrated to yourself that your peace is not negotiable, that your standards are not flexible based on who's asking, that you would rather walk alone in integrity than compromise for company. And when you pass this test, something fundamental shifts inside you. You realize that you really are okay on your own, not just surviving, but genuinely at peace. And that realization is the key that unlocks everything. Let's talk about what ruthless self-sufficiency looks like in different domains of life, because it's not a one-size-fits-all prescription. In relationships, it means you never beg for attention, communication, or commitment. You state your standards clearly, you observe whether they're met, and you make decisions based on reality, not potential. You don't try to change people or wait for them to become who you need them to be. You simply decide whether who they are right now is compatible with your life, and you act accordingly. When someone shows you who they are, you believe them immediately. And if that person doesn't align with your standards, you remove them from your life without drama, explanation, or a farewell tour on social media. You understand that your time and energy are finite resources, and you allocate them only to people who demonstrate reciprocity, respect, and value. In your career, ruthless self-sufficiency means you never become so dependent on a single source of income that you can't walk away if necessary. You build multiple skills, multiple revenue streams, multiple options. You do excellent work not because you need recognition from your boss, but because your standards demand it. You're not kissing up to anyone or playing political games to climb a ladder you're not even sure you want to climb. You're building real competence and leveraging it strategically. And if an environment becomes toxic, if your values are compromised, if you're not growing, you leave. Not in a dramatic rage quit, but in a calm, calculated exit. Because you know that your worth is not tied to your job title and your identity is not wrapped up in your career. These things are tools you use to build the life you want, not cages you're trapped in. In your social life, self-sufficiency means you're not desperate for invitations, not anxious about being included, not performing for acceptance. You cultivate a small circle of high-quality relationships with people who actually add value to your life, and you let everyone else remain acquaintances or fade into the background. You don't chase friendships. You don't try to convince people to appreciate you. You simply show up as yourself, and those who resonate stay, those who don't leave. And you're genuinely okay with either outcome. You become the kind of person who can attend a party and be perfectly content talking to no one. You can sit alone at a restaurant without compulsively checking your phone to look busy. You can exist in public spaces without needing to be perceived, validated, or entertained by others. This is rare. This is power. In your internal world, self-sufficiency means you've developed the ability to regulate your own emotions without needing external soothing. When you're anxious, you don't immediately call someone to talk you down. You sit with the anxiety, investigate its source, and address it yourself. When you're sad, you don't need someone to cheer you up. You honor the sadness, understand what it's telling you, and let it pass naturally. When you're angry, you don't explode on others or suppress it until it becomes resentment. You channel it into productive action or let it dissipate through physical exertion. You become your own therapist, your own coach, your own support system. Not because you're too proud to ask for help, but because you're capable enough not to need it for every emotional fluctuation. And when you do seek external input, it's from a place of strategic curiosity, not desperate need. Here's something they won't tell you in self-help books. Ruthless self-sufficiency will cost you the comfort of victim mentality. You can no longer blame others for your circumstances. You can no longer use your past as an excuse for your present. You can no longer outsource responsibility for your emotional state, your financial situation, your relationship status, or your life satisfaction. Everything becomes your responsibility. And while this is terrifying at first, it's also profoundly liberating. Because if everything is your responsibility, that means everything is within your control. You're not waiting for someone to save you, validate you, complete you, or fix you. You're taking full ownership of your existence and crafting it deliberately. This shift from victim to creator is perhaps the most significant transformation a human being can undergo. Now let me address a common misconception. Self-sufficiency does not mean you never experience pain, never feel lonely, never want connection. You're not trying to become a robot. You're trying to become someone whose experience of these human emotions doesn't translate into desperate, needy behavior that compromises your integrity. You can miss someone without chasing them. You can feel lonely without settling for bad company. You can desire connection without morphing yourself into whatever you think others want. The emotions are still there. You're just not enslaved by them. You feel them, you understand what they're indicating, and then you make conscious decisions about how to respond. This is mastery. This is freedom. Let's examine what happens in your psyche as you develop ruthless self-sufficiency. Initially, there's resistance. Your programming rebels against isolation. Your social conditioning screams that you need others to survive. Your evolutionary wiring that kept your ancestors safe in tribes activates fear responses when you pull away from the herd. This is normal. Push through it. As you persist, something remarkable happens. The internal chatter starts to quiet. The constant need for validation diminishes. The anxiety about what others think begins to fade. You start noticing that you're thinking your own thoughts rather than thoughts that were implanted by family, society, media, or peer pressure. You start making decisions based on your actual values rather than performatively doing what looks good to others. Your life starts to feel like it's actually yours, and this feeling is addictive in the best possible way. You'll reach a point where solitude is not something you tolerate, but something you crave. Where time alone is not a punishment, but a reward. Where your own company becomes so rich, so interesting, so fulfilling, that most social interaction feels like a downgrade. This is when you know you've crossed the threshold. You're no longer afraid of being alone. In fact, you're protective of your alone time. You guard it jealously because you know it's where your power is cultivated. This is where you think, plan, reflect, create. This is where you strip away all the masks and exist as your true self without performance or pretense. And the more time you spend here, the stronger that true self becomes. But here's where it gets interesting. As you become genuinely self-sufficient, you'll notice that you paradoxically become more attractive to others. High-quality people are drawn to those who don't need them. There's something magnetic about a person who is complete within themselves. Your lack of desperation reads as confidence. Your ability to walk away reads as high standards. Your comfort with solitude reads as depth. And suddenly, opportunities, relationships, and possibilities that were never available when you were needy start presenting themselves. Not because you're seeking them, but because your energy has fundamentally changed. You're no longer radiating desperation. You're radiating self-possession. And self-possession is rare enough to be inherently valuable. This creates an interesting dynamic. The more self-sufficient you become, the more options you have. And the more options you have, the more selective you become, which makes you even more self-sufficient. It's a virtuous cycle that compounds over time. Each choice you make from a place of abundance rather than scarcity reinforces your internal power. Each time you walk away from something that doesn't meet your standards, you prove to yourself that your standards are non-negotiable. And each time you prove that to yourself, your self-respect deepens. Eventually, you reach a state where your internal sense of self is so solid that external circumstances barely register as disturbances. You've built something unshakable. Let me give you a practical test to measure your progress toward ruthless self-sufficiency. Imagine that everyone in your life, every single person, decided tomorrow that they no longer wanted contact with you. Not because you did anything wrong, just because they chose to move on. Sit with that scenario. How do you feel? If the thought creates panic, if you immediately start catastrophizing about loneliness and isolation, you're still dependent. You still need others for your sense of stability and identity. But if you can sit with that scenario and feel, yes, it would be sad, I would miss certain people, but I would be fundamentally okay. I would rebuild. I would continue pursuing my path. Then you're approaching self-sufficiency. The goal is not to become unfeeling, it's to become unbreakable. There's a final stage in this journey that few reach, and it's the most paradoxical. It's when self-sufficiency transforms from a defensive posture into a generative force. You're no longer building walls to keep people out. You're building a kingdom to invite the right people in. You've become so secure in your independence that you can genuinely connect with others without losing yourself in the process. You can love without attachment. You can commit without dependency. You can invest in relationships while maintaining your sovereignty. This is rare. This is the ideal. Most people never progress beyond codependency or avoidant isolation. But there's a third option, interdependence from a place of independence, where two sovereign individuals choose to collaborate, share, and build together, not because they need each other, but because they recognize that the combination of their independent strengths creates something greater than the sum of its parts. If you've made it this far, you're not here by accident. Most people would have scrolled away long before now, uncomfortable with the truth that's been laid bare. But you're still here, which means something in you recognizes this path. Something in you knows that the version of yourself that needs constant validation, that compromises for company, that tolerates disrespect to avoid loneliness, that version is dying, and you're ready to let it die. This is not comfortable, this is not easy, but it is necessary. So here's what I need you to do. Not for me, not for the algorithm, but as a declaration to yourself. Comment the phrase, "I am my own kingdom." This is your line in the sand. This is you acknowledging that the old way of being is no longer acceptable, that you're committed to building something within yourself so powerful that external circumstances become irrelevant. And if you're serious about this transformation, subscribe to this space. Because what we're building here is not a collection of casual viewers. It's a community of individuals who have chosen sovereignty over comfort, truth over pleasant lies, and self-mastery over external validation. Every piece of content you'll find here is designed to sharpen you, to challenge you, to strip away the comfortable delusions that keep most people trapped. This is not entertainment. This is instruction for those brave enough to walk a path that most will never understand, and many will judge. But you're not here for their understanding or approval. You're here because you recognized something true, something real, something that resonated in a place deeper than logic. Trust that resonance. Follow it. And watch as your life transforms from something you're merely surviving into something you're deliberately creating. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are not defined by your relationships. You are not dependent on external validation for your worth. You are, or you are becoming, ruthlessly self-sufficient. And in that self-sufficiency lies a freedom that most people will spend their entire lives never experiencing. They'll live and die as puppets, dancing to strings they never learned to see, much less cut. But not you. You see the strings now, and you're cutting them one by one, until you stand alone, whole, complete, and finally, truly free. Welcome to your kingdom. Population 1, and that's exactly as it should be.